Hey, friends, and welcome to Next Best Thing podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Cline-Thomas. I'm here to help you live the life that you design instead of choosing a life that you think you have to settle for. Okay, we were just going to do a solo dolo episode, and then the last 2 weeks happened. So one thing that I really loved about news is that there were so many moments where I'm like, I am standing in history right now. Like history is being written in this moment. And in the last few weeks, I've just had so many emotions from like complete rage to disappointment to hope to back to rage. And so when President Biden stepped out of the race and then endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris, that sent everything through my body again. And I was like, I need to talk to somebody. Who can I talk to? And I said, the hope pusher herself, Katrina Gamble. Who is a political strategist, a community organizer, all things to help us kind of dissect what the hell is going on right now. So Katrina, thank you so much for hopping on this call so quickly. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It is a time.
It is a time. And that's where I want to start. How are you processing this time?
I am honestly, I'm in Phoenix visiting my family, and I was in church and I came out and my phone was just exploding with text messages with people asking me, is this true? Is this happening? What does this mean? And so I think I had to take a moment I was actually quite surprised. I knew that there was a push for it, but I was shocked that it happened, and that it happened yesterday. And so I spent a lot of time yesterday really just processing the information and like what it means moving forward. But I'm excited about it. It's like you said, it's historic. It's an unprecedented moment in our country's history, in our politics. But I think I'm as excited as I've ever been for this election this year.
I am too, actually. I've told friends that I haven't been so politically motivated ever in my life. And I think it's also because I'm out of news and I've never been allowed to be. And now that I
Hmm.
can be, I'm just like, all right, so what do you do? But let's back up here. Can you just set the stage of what really are we up against? You having such a broad knowledge of the electorate at large. What are the conversations that the campaign is really having? Like, what does this look like moving forward on the ground?
Right. Well, the first step is, obviously President Biden, as he stepped out of the race, endorsed Kamala Harris, and there was an avalanche of other political and elected officials in the Democratic Party also endorsing her, Gavin Newsom, the Clintons, and so on and so forth. And then overnight, there were several state Democratic Party delegations that started saying they were pledging their delegates to Kamala Harris. But the first step is she needs to officially get the nomination for the Democratic Party. And I think, many of us are assuming, like, with her endorsements and the money she's raised and has access to, because she was on the Biden Harris ticket, that she is obviously the person who's going to get the nomination. But that is not a formality. That is something that still needs to happen. So, you probably saw, if you were watching the news last night, that Vice President Harris was making calls. Many people were talking to folks in state party committees across the country to ensure that she had the support, and that ahead of the convention in Chicago, that she actually, has the delegates and gets the official nomination before. I think everyone wants that to happen well before Chicago, so that the Democratic Party can go into the convention unified around Vice President Harris as the candidate.
And that was a big question of like, okay, in running all the scenarios, if President Biden stepped out, is there now chaos at the convention where that's where they're going to figure it out? And then it just would be kind of be a mess. But it does
Hmm.
seem like the whole Democratic apparatus has coalesced behind her, and Joe Manchin had first said, no, I'm not going to do it. Then he said, no, I am going to do it. Now he's like, I ain't going to get no money to do it. So let me just go ahead and fall in line. Hopefully he stays that way, but you never know with him. So it just does appear that the whole Democratic apparatus is coming behind her and is checking the boxes to formally like make this happen. But there are, by the time this airs, it will be less than 100 days
Mm-hmm.
until the election. It's a sprint. And part of it is like, that was part of my anger. So I was like, okay, so now you got a Black woman. If that, I mean, that's already hard enough in life. And then a Black woman at the top of the ticket. And then now she's got to clean up Democratic mess. And now she's also got to make her case to the American people. And then now she's also got to deal with the onslaught of racism, sexism, all the isms all together. What will it take to overcome that?
Yes. I agree that she is definitely coming into run, like we said, it's unprecedented. She is going to be running a presidential race under circumstances that no one in the history of this country has ever had to run a race. But I think that she is very well positioned to do it. They have raised a lot of money. A lot of money came in last night. I can't remember how much. It was well over $40 million they raised within 24 hours or something like that of President Biden announcing and endorsing her. And I was on a call last night where there
I
were like
I
44,000
was on
Black
that call.
women
I was
who
on that
got on.
call.
So, folks are energized. It
Yeah.
is definitely going to take some work, but I think folks are energized. I think moments like last night, like the 44,000 women getting on a call to understand what is this moment, how can we move to action to support Vice President Harris, is an indication of one of the most important things that her campaign needs to do, which is get her base organized. And I think that that is already happening. I think folks are, like I said, folks are excited about the shift. I think many of the maybe some of the young voters, young women who may have been feeling disengaged or less excited about this election, may are taking another look. And I think it's a real opportunity to not only organize the base, like the folks who are already going to vote, but to bring on some of the folks who weren't necessarily leaning towards Trump, but were probably looking to not vote at all or check out of the election, to like bring them into the space. So honestly, I think there's a huge opportunity for her. And given where she is in the polls coming in, she's already basically neck and neck with Trump coming in. Nothing has happened except for this announcement. So once the
Mhm.
campaign begins, I think there's real opportunity for her to really shift the elections.
Yeah. And so that call was of Black women and probably some lurkers on there too. But Black women raised $1.5 million in just 3 hours. It was an off the record call, but it was, that was the most, I would say that is the most amazing thing that I've seen, because it's what we're raised to do and it's how we're raised to be. And for me, it's amazing because, like, my parents are African, right? So I wasn't raised in an African American tradition. And so that came, the American part came in school and stuff like that. But in my home, it was very different. But it just shows that even in the diaspora, that we were, as Black women, raised to be in community. And so whenever anything happens, we just fall on that community and say, okay, how are we going to do this together? And so I was like, before the call, when I was like, going through all the emotions, I was going on threads, and Black women were like, this country's raggedy, but here we go again. We got to roll up our sleeves, and here we go. Like, we got to carry the nation on our back yet again. And here we go. And so I was just like, oh, we all understand the assignment, right? Like, we
Hmm.
all understand, like, this, we're, Black women are, as a collective, always the moral compass, and saying we're weary, we're irritated, but we're also going to get to work. And I think that's what last night, like the call, really demonstrated. Um,
Yes.
was just collect how we were all raised the same way.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And it is true to this point, and I know I've always said this, that really, like, community is such a powerful tool, and last night was just like such a clear indication of that. And I do think that in this moment, that is also what's going to need to happen to honestly protect our country from fascism and the threat to our democracy on the other side of this election. And it is going to take folks organizing in community. It is going to take folks organizing in large spaces at scale, like last night, but it's also going to take folks organizing in their own communities, in their neighborhoods, talking to their families, organizations who've been working in different communities, from immigrant communities to Black communities to women, folks who've been organizing women to like kind of roll up our sleeves, and folks have already been doing it, but they've been kind of pushing against this kind of malaise,
Mm-hmm.
and disillusionment about our elections and like what's happening. And I think with Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket for the Democratic Party, it opens up an opportunity for folks to start organizing with folks and tap into hopefully some level of excitement going into
Mm-hmm.
this election, and some sense of hope that people might feel that there's something different, that there's actual opportunity for us to win.
Can we just set the stage of really what's at stake for somebody who really thinks, well, let's back up. For somebody who thinks this is just so big, like this is one thing, it's the Project 2025 of it all,
Hmm.
right? And like really what is at stake, but also to make history and possibly have a Black female, like having a Black man president, that was like, whoa. But having a Black woman is even more of a like, you have got to be kidding. Like, for real, like this could actually happen now, like right now. It feels humongous. How do we not
Hmm.
get overwhelmed with the moment that we're in where it doesn't cause like paralysis?
Yes, it is humongous for sure. And I know that there are some folks who are worried about that because she's a Black woman. Well, what will that mean? Will people vote for her or not? But I honestly am not worried about that. I think that Kamala Harris brings a lot of experience, and I think she brings a lot of energy that is going to like excite folks and bring people out who were otherwise not going to be out. But you're right, it is a huge moment. And I think the biggest thing is like for folks like myself who work in organizing people and voters, is to give people information to it is a historic moment in terms of her candidacy, but it is also an election where people are still concerned about the cost of living, raising their families, and so we also can't get lost in just the candidate. A lot of the work is still going to be connecting the dots between Vice President Harris, and her campaign, and like what that's actually going to mean for people. And so I think taking a breath, celebrating the moment, that it is a historic moment, and getting to work, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like the folks who do this work know what the work is, and that is really going to be communicating to people. I always say elections are not about candidates; it's about people, and so we have to remember that, and we have to stay focused on that.
What about the Democratic agenda should people really highlight? Because we've like the conversation has been about the people and not really about the policy. So let's talk about the policy and how it trickles down. So what would you say to somebody who was ready to stay home? What would you say about the policy that could, ignite them to head to the polls?
Well, I mean, like I've said this before, like we don't, especially for Black people, we're often not motivated to vote by fear or anger. But I know that there is a moment now where folks are like, there's a lot at stake. We've mentioned 2025, and so I do think speaking to some degree about what is at stake with our democracy with the Trump presidency, and like what that means, not only for our rights to vote, but there's like so many other threats of dismantling the Department of Education, threats to LGBTQ and immigrant communities, and like so many people that are our families and friends. But to your point, we can't just lead with what we are fighting against. We also have to lead with what we are fighting for. And so I do think, honestly, the Biden Harris administration, they have a great track record on things like the economy, on climate justice, on reproductive justice, on abortion rights, all things that I think are really important issues for folks right now. I think that message just was not breaking through because there was so much concern about President Biden's age. And so even though people they were saying it, people were not hearing it. And so I
Mhm.
do think that this is like an entirely new opportunity to lean into those issues. The top things that people care about are inflation and cost of living. And then after that, it's like safety, abortion rights, reproductive justice, like all the things that we know that people are thinking about and concerned about. And so I think the Democratic Party has the better agenda on those issues. And hopefully, with Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket, they're able to communicate that to voters in ways that they can hear it and understand it,
Mhm.
and are moved to action.
Can we speak a little bit more specifically about that agenda? Because I do feel like there has been a lot of noise. And as people are listening to this, they might be inclined to vote. Most of the people who listen are women. So they're action oriented anyway. But like, what are arming folks with what they should say at the barbecues, at the family functions? You know what I mean? More specifically, we'll talk about Project 2025 shortly, but like more specifically as to your point of the conversation can't just be centered around what you're voting against. It has to really center what you're voting for. So are there specific policies that you think would really galvanize folks that has been lost in the sauce of the rhetoric?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's like anything that is going to make it better for people to like live and take care of their families.
Mm.
So things like the child tax credit, which was passed under President Biden, but then um, was not able to be extended because of it was blocked by Republican Congress, that gave families literally $600 a month in their bank accounts. It reduced poverty by 50%. There's like so many proposals on the table to address the care economy, to allow people to support folks with childcare and elder care, and providing proper wages for healthcare workers who take who care workers who take care and support our families when they're struggling. And so honestly, I think leading with some of those economic issues, obviously student loan debt, um, despite the court decisions, the Biden Harris administration were able um, uh, to relieve student loan debt for like millions of dollars of student loan debt. And so I think that is like something that's on the table. So for me, I mean, in addition to abortion rights and reproductive justice, I would suggest leading with things around cost of living and the economy. I think those are the things that are kind of front of mind for folks right now, in addition to a number of other issues.
Hmm. No, I think that's really, really helpful. And we are also in a space of democracy being on the line, and it's in plain sight, right? Like the effort to dismantle democracy is literally written down. That's what all this talk about Project 2025 is. It's what, over 900-page document that was written, has been authored by President Trump's former staffers, essentially, the ones who didn't go to prison, because so many did. And so it really outlines, it's been described as a manifesto as to what the future will look like. It's not covert, it is in plain sight. You can go and read it. We know it's like very thick, but it is all about dismantling. It's not just like policies of we believe this. It's about how we dismantle the structure of government so that the president will have ultimate rule over everything.
Hmm.
Describe kind of some of those things. You were talking about the Department of Education. They would get rid of the Department of Education. Like literally it's not like being facetious. They would get rid of the Department of Education to leave educating our children up to the states. That's just
Yes.
one of many policies. Talk about what else is in Project 2025.
Yes, so you mentioned that one of the things it is takes a straight arrow of attack at civil servants who serve in a lot of our federal agencies, which, like you said, it really that is incredibly important. If all of our federal agencies are being led by political appointees, these are agencies that are created to serve us as people who live in the United States, and it shouldn't be about politics. And so that's like one of the things is like dismantling a department like the Department of Education. It has things in there about having the president have direct oversight over the FBI and the Department of Justice, which obviously that would be hugely problematic to not have an independent Department of Justice. And like replacing a lot of the civil servants in those agencies with political appointees. There are things in there about basically changing all of the things that we've been trying to make around climate justice, and rolling back on those things, which it is a real and existential threat that we have to address. And so it on many of the things that we care about, and to your point, it really centers the power in the presidency in a way that would totally undermine our democracy, where we are a country of checks and balances, and this would really you know work to destroy that. And with the current Supreme Court, which we would think would be the protection for against something like that, we obviously know that is not a guarantee with the current justices that are on the Supreme Court right now. So it's not a pretend worry about our democracy. I think it's a real threat that we should all be worried about and aware of when we're thinking about like what's at stake in this moment.
I was saw something that the Washington Post had. It was just on Instagram, was talking about Project 2025 wanting to remove the weather alert system. So the system that warns you when tornadoes and hurricanes and all the severe weather is coming, by dismantling NOAA and some other agencies. That weather alert system would go away. So, when government is working well, you don't even recognize it. Like, that's an indication that government is working well. Like, Ebola didn't become a thing in the United States because the government went into action and created a plan. COVID was so detrimental because the government didn't step in the way it was supposed to. Like, the dysfunction made COVID so deadly. So, Bernie Sanders said government's supposed to be boring, and it absolutely is. And so when the structures are dismantled, that's when it really starts affecting how you go about your day-to-day life in this way. So if you're like, well, it used to be this way, it's because government was working, and the only policy differences were, we agreed on what the facts were, but how we address those facts, especially when it came to like fiscal conservatism, that's where the differences came with the party. Not if we needed the Department of Justice, not if we needed the Department of Education. Like, those were not the fights that were being had before. Let's just talk about the electorate, because I think we need to talk about the different groups. Because as you say, like, Black women we're community coalesce. Let's talk about white women. I just think we need to name it. How should white women meet this moment? Because what we saw in the election of Donald Trump came, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of the polling before, didn't seem like it was going to happen. And then the polling after showed that white women, when they went into the ballot box, they voted against their self-interest in terms of reproductive rights, right? Like in terms of bodily autonomy, went into the voting booth and voted against that. Yet again, and historically, just because Black women show up, like there hasn't always been in terms of like the feminist coalition, white women and black women haven't always been historically or usually not on the same page, right? So what do you say? I'm sorry, we just got to say it out loud because this is what's happening in the group chats. Or what are white ladies going to do? We know what they're going to say, but what are they really going to do? And what do they need to consider at this moment right now? So it's not a whole situation where as a collective, white women are going into the ballot box and voting against their self-interest and then marching in the street the day later because then they're irritated that how the collective voted is now going to harm them directly, right? Like with pussy hats on, because it's kind of like, so let's just be clear.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that I think that you named it, right? I think that 2016 was a wake up call for many, 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 many people, including some of the white women who voted for Donald Trump in 2016, and that's a bit of why you saw that the shift of folks who voted for Trump in 2016 who then voted for now President Biden in 2020. And so I think I'm less worried about like folks reverting back to 2016 because if nothing else, with the Dobbs decision and the fall of Roe, I think and like things like 2025. I mean, everybody's talking about, which this is like this super policy wonky tank 900-page things. Yeah. And I'm like, at my family reunion and people are talking about Project 2025. So it's like everyone is like aware of the threat to our democracy. And also like folks are living through the reality of some of that with the fall of the Dobbs decision. And so I think that reality for folks is like people get it. And so I'm like less concerned that there will be this major like wave of like white women who are gonna like vote for Trump. I think that the Democratic Party will get a significant amount of support from white women voters, but like just like us, like just like Black people, they're not a monolith. There are white women who are conservative and ideologically aligned with the Republican Party, and they will vote based off of that. And then there are a number of women who those are not their values. And I think that with Vice President Harris at the ticket, the opportunity for us to have the first woman president in the United States, I think that will move a lot of people who maybe were on the fence or maybe who were planning to not show up at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, you call yourself the hope pusher for a reason.
I mean, honestly, but
because look at what happened to Hillary. Look at what happened to Hillary.
It's true.
I mean, it was like Hillary and Trump, and there couldn't have been more of like it was just like it was like, oh, America hates smart women. They just hate educated women. Look at Elizabeth Warren. Like who has a plan for everything. And for real though, she really does have a plan. She really has thought about this, and she really does have a plan, and her plan is like very in the weeds. She understands the complexity. Like it's just like, oh, like America does not really appreciate educated women and the way educated women are treated, like even with Kamala Harris, that her like mamala and what are your favorite like recipes to cook? Like, what? You know what I mean? Like, Drew Barrymore sitting with her, we need a mamala. No, you need a therapist. Stop it. You know what I'm saying? You need to work that out with somebody else. Like that. We need a mamala. She is the vice president. She is one of the most powerful people in the world. And you're sitting there telling her we need a mamala? What? Yeah.
Right. And I actually have to say something. I mean, to this point, I think you're absolutely right. And I am the hope pusher, but I am under no disillusionment, right? That there are going to be attacks on Vice President Harris based off of nothing else but because she is a Black woman. That there will be attacks on her because of her race and because of her gender, and there will be misinformation that will be spread. And so we all kind of have to be really vigilant about that and pay attention to it and like call it to task. And honestly, make sure that our friends and family know how to identify things that are not true
Right.
on the internets, because I think that becomes part of the problem, is that there's this like swirl of information that gets shared. And so I'm under no illusions that it's going to be like smooth sailing, but I do think that we 2024 is a different moment than 2016. And in part, it's because of all the things that have happened since then, with COVID, with like I said, with the fall of Roe, with some of the threats around how agencies' authority, like to pass certain policies. So I think that people, like folks who maybe were like didn't see Donald Trump as a threat. Some people thought he was entertaining. I never got that, but whatever. Who voted for him for different reasons. I think the shift from then to now is like we've lived through 4 years of him as president, and so people know what that looks like. And also, we in some ways with the Supreme Court living through the repercussions of those 4 years even now. And so I think those are the things that like makes 2024 different than 2016, in ways that it will really, I do think it provides an opportunity to build a real coalition across race and gender, of folks who believe in democracy and who want to protect our democracy, and who want to protect our planet, and who also want to be able to provide for their families. So
Yeah.
so I think that's the thing. But that doesn't mean it's not going to be messy. That doesn't mean there's not going to be these crazy attacks. But I do think that that there's real opportunity in this moment.
So let's talk about the work ahead for everyday people. Less than 100 days left. What does the work need to look like for the everyday person?
The work for the everyday person is, one, making sure that you understand the laws for yourself to be registered to vote in the state in which you are living, making sure you are registered to vote and that you're ready to vote come November. If you are someone who that is already taken care of, then I think your next job is to find your closest 25 friends, who may already also be registered to vote, and share information with them on how they can take action. So making phone calls, text messages, knocking on doors. And for folks who aren't like, I don't want to do this for the Democratic Party, like, perhaps, they want to move, but they're not necessarily like a member of the Democratic Party. There's like a number of incredible grassroots power building organizations across the country that's going to be doing work, that's going to be organizing voters and communities. And so the biggest thing is for folks to find out what those organizations are in the state in which they live, and find ways to plug in. And for those folks who are on the edge, talk to your nephews and nieces, talk to your uncles who are like, I don't know about this election, and start having conversations with people. I mean, really, that is the work, is to start having conversations with people, to like bring them in, to get them engaged, for them to understand what's at stake, to understand what the options are between one ticket and the other ticket, so that they can make an informed decision.
That's fantastic because that makes it less overwhelming. And I do appreciate you saying it's like not doing it for the Democratic Party, or really, like for me, it's not even about, because like, in news, you can never talk about any of this stuff. But I feel like we're in a place where it is objective to say that Project 2025 will dismantle democracy. It is an objective statement. Like the data supports it. Like, and so I think that with news and with, I have a lot of news people who listen or watch, the way that the Trump presidency has like turned the news media on its head, and it's grappling with the actual facts, right? And what that looks like to share the actual facts and who the actual facts may offend. We have to be really centering the facts in this, because this is why we got into it in the first place. And so I think that's why I'm so fired up, because I don't have the golden handcuffs on anymore, but I'm also not trying to shill for a party. I have never been excited about Vice President Harris, personally, but what is really at stake is so stark. The vision for the country is so stark. Being in New York City and seeing the refrigerated trucks outside of hospitals because people were dying en masse, being in Black and brown communities where people were just literally dropping dead. It was living through that reality. It literally gives me chills. It literally gives me chills. And so there is plenty of work that needs to be done. The disparities are still too wide. Feeling like a Black woman who's starting an entrepreneurial journey and just feel like fighting for every coin that I get. There's still a lot of work to be done. But in one of the group chats, people were like, I have issues with her being a prosecutor. I have issues with her record. They're like, but I will deal with that in January. Right now, you know what I mean? It's not about a person. It's about, what do you want the country to look like? What option do you want to give the country for what it will look like? Because we are going down a slippery slope. And that is an objective statement. It is no longer what would have been defined as subjective. So this is why I just really wanted to have this conversation. What do you do kind of moving forward now as we wrap everything up? How do you move forward now?
Yes, I mean, it's like similar to what you said, and I said this. I had this post. It was like even before the first presidential debate. I posted. I said, my job after this debate is going to be the same as my job was before this debate, and that is to support organizations who are educating and organizing people to be engaged in our democracy and understand their power and their voice. And that is what it is for me. That is what my job is now. I've always said that elections are not about candidates. They are about people. They are about issues. And regardless of who is at the top of the ticket, like, my job is going to be the same. My job is to support organizations who are on the ground in communities, organizing people, helping people understand that with all of the chaos that is happening with our elections, they still have power in this democracy, helping them understand that and helping them find the pathways to engage and flex that power in this moment. Because like you said, there's a lot at stake. And ultimately, that is what is going to save us, is for people to understand their power and for them to exercise their power.
Yeah.
And if that happens, I think we'll be good on the other side of November.
Yeah. It's like the work doesn't stop after November. It continues. Like it's an ongoing process. And so what I'll do is that in the description, I'll be putting some resources. And then also in the Next Nuggets newsletter, you can go to andreact.com or nextbestthingpodcast.com. And sign up for the newsletter. Every single week, I'll be sharing resources for things that I'm researching and finding, because last night I was just thinking about, all right, well, what can I do? I don't have a major platform anymore. So what does that look like? And I was just like, you just use your gifts in your little corner of the world. So my gift is communication. So I have told a friend who has a women's community, I will moderate any events. I will help you organize, events around this to get information out there. That's my gift, is really about, let's find the information. And so people don't need to go outside of themselves. You just got to use your gift and to impact your corner of the world. So you will get information from me every single week. That's what I'm committed to help us all kind of, as I'm learning, I'm going to pass that along. So that's what I will do moving forward, so we can all help make sense of this and do our part, really. Do our part. Well, thank you so much for being here, Katrina. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I feel better.
That's great. Well, that's great. I'm glad.
I feel much better. Much better.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you.